So with Age of Ultron issue number 9, we're going to get this sort of piecing together of events, this idea of the alternate road that Wolverine could have taken had he actually decided to use the advice that was given to him by Tony Stark in the alternate reality. Now before we get too far into the story, I'm going to let you guys know ahead of time, this story is going to get confusing as fuck. So I'm going to do what I can to try to explain it as best I can to keep it as simple as possible. So what we see as we start this story is that for the most part, the helicarriers have already crashed into New York City. And New York City is almost totally destroyed. The immediate vicinity where the helicarriers have crashed is virtually in shambles. But in addition to this, almost all the superheroes, the Defenders, and most everybody who was part of this conflict is dead. But as we see, Wolverine is one of the only individuals who's able to escape, and he's able to get out of the rubble. From here, we switch to about 5 days later, and Wolverine's leg has completely healed itself, and as he prepares to walk away, to move away, he's attacked by a couple Doombots, indicating to us that over the course of this 5 days, that Morgana Le Fay has successfully been able to take over this half of the world, and so most likely she takes over the entire world. Now we don't really know what happens with her after this. We don't know if she even survived the conflict or if she was killed in the process, but as things begin to move forward, we see that, of course, Wolverine is able to easily overpower and destroy these Doombots due to, of course, his adamantium claws, in addition to his accelerated healing factor. And so, for the most part, the Doombots aren't really able to do much against him. But after he's able to successfully destroy the Doombots, he again continues to walk away, but he's grabbed by Tony Stark. And Tony Stark asks him whether or not a person like Hank Pym could make so much of a difference, if his existence would really be able to change the world entirely, to make it something other than what it is right now. And so he tells Wolverine that he knows he's going to try to travel back in time and to stop himself from killing Hank Pym. He knows he's going to try to fix his mistake, but that he can't do that. And the reason why is because time, again, is not this indestructible thing. Time is not this absolute construct. Time, as he explains it, is a living organism that while it doesn't necessarily have sentience, it doesn't really walk around and move around, that time is part of everything. It's part of all life, and that it can bend and it can break, and that if Wolverine keeps manipulating time too much, that he'll tear it and he'll destroy time entirely. And the question would become, what would happen if time didn't exist anymore? What would happen if it came to an end? Because the individuals who would be affected here would not just be Wolverine and Tony Stark and the other Earthbound heroes, that it would be the universe as a whole, indicating to us that it's quite possible that the ramifications of Wolverine's actions could have an impact on not just this universe, but other universes as well, which of course is something we will see in that Angela will be brought to this universe and that Galactus will be affected by Wolverine's actions as well. From here, we transition back to the point in which Wolverine had initially encountered Hank Pym and attempted to kill him. And for the sake of this discussion and what's going to be coming up, we're going to be referring to the Wolverine that's wearing gray as the normal Wolverine, and the Wolverine that's wearing his old uniform as the classic Wolverine. And again, I know this is a little confusing, but once the video begins to wrap up, it'll all make sense and it'll all tie together. But again, the normal version of Wolverine has not killed Hank Pym yet. And so of course, he's telling Hank Pym the same thing that he had told him, that he's transitioning back to the same moment when he says that Hank Pym had done some great things in the world, that Hank Pym had done what he could, but that in the end, the actions of Hank Pym wiping out, or I guess creating Ultron, who in turn wiped out all life on the planet, is something that just cannot be ignored. And so again, Wolverine prepares to kill Hank Pym. From here, we transition back to Susan Storm, who's standing out by the car, and Susan Storm is debating with herself. She's asking what it is that she's doing out here. Why is it that she's simply just waiting? She says that she can't let this happen, but that the needs of her friends are also the needs of her own. And so the question that she's debating with herself is the same debate that her and Wolverine had previously gotten into, where the issue was which one is more important, the needs of the many or what it is that she thinks is right. But before she's able to take any action, she's presumably knocked out by by somebody. At this point, we transition back to the normal Wolverine as he's fighting and attempting to kill Hank Pym. But again, before he's able to engage too much further, before he's able to actually deal a killing blow to Hank Pym, somebody yells stop. And when they turn around, we see the Wolverine that had initially jumped forward and killed Hank Pym the first time. And again, we're going to refer to him as Classic Wolverine. And Classic Wolverine tells normal Wolverine that this isn't going to work, that Hank Pym dying is not going to fix the problem, that when Hank Pym dies, that it creates a reality that's just as bad, if not worse, than the reality that the normal Wolverine had left in an attempt to kill Hank Pym in order to fix it. And what a normal Wolverine believes is that perhaps this is some kind of a ruse, that perhaps this is some kind of a joke. But Classic Wolverine tells a normal Wolverine to stand down. He says that this is not some kind of a ruse, that this is him coming to him to try to tell him what it is that's going to happen, what it is that's going to take place if he engages in this action. Classic Wolverine also tells Hank Pym that this is exactly what it looks like, that normal Wolverine had come there in an attempt to kill him, and that with his death, he had hoped that Ultron, by virtue of having never been created, would cease to exist and that the future would be fixed. But normal Wolverine asks Classic Wolverine who it was that sent him, if it was Captain America, if perhaps he's there on Ultron's orders. But Classic Wolverine tells normal Wolverine that it's the outfit that he's currently wearing is the only outfit that was brought with him, but that the whole purpose of him being here is to try to keep normal Wolverine from killing Hank Pym. And what Classic Wolverine does is he gives normal Wolverine some kind of proof that he is really Wolverine. He simply just tells him 1928 Charlene Baumgartner. And this seems to be some kind of proof. This seems to be some kind of evidence to indicate that Classic Wolverine is really Wolverine and that the two of them are existing in the same time. And so normal Wolverine begins to listen. He begins to pay attention to what it is that's going on, and he asks Classic Wolverine what it is that they should do. And of course, he offers a few suggestions. He says maybe they should kill him another time. Maybe they should go back and kill him as a baby. But for the most part, Classic Wolverine says no. He says that Hank Pym has to exist, that Hank Pym has to live, that he has to create Ultron. And he says that Tony Stark had given him some kind of an idea, something about possibly creating a virus. But for the most part, Hank Pym is very shocked to see all of this taking place. He's amazed to know that that Wolverine knows who Tony Stark is. He's amazed to know that he, of course, is an Avenger when he claims to have been an Avenger. It's really interesting for Hank Pym to watch this thing unfold, to learn that time travel does exist. And for the most part, we see that Hank Pym says okay. He says that if the future comes to a very dark point, if the future is led to a place whereby Ultron is able to conquer the world, then he simply won't make Ultron. But Classic Wolverine says no. He says that everything that has ever happened up until the point when he first went back in time has to happen. That all those things have to take place. Otherwise, the universe could end up, or all of reality could end up in a much worse place than it is right now. And so again, the question is asked, does it mean that Ultron has to be created? And that if Ultron is going to mop the floor with them, then why should Hank Pym create Ultron in the first place? But again, Classic Wolverine says that some kind of time-release virus can be installed in Ultron. Some kind of time-release virus can be made so that when Ultron attempts to take over the world the first time, that this virus can be activated and that Ultron won't actually come to power. But for the most part, we again see both of these Wolverines debating with one another. We see both of these Wolverines again trying to come to terms. Normal Wolverine still wants to kill Hank Pym, but Classic Wolverine is continuing to try to convince him that killing Hank Pym will not fix the world's problems, that it will not make things better. Again, we see Hank Pym saying that he knows what he has to do, that for the most part, he's now prepared about what will take place. He knows that if Ultron being created is going to lead to Ultron evolving itself, and by virtue of evolving itself, leading multiple incursions against the Avengers and against the planet Earth, that now they'll know. But again, Classic Wolverine says that this won't work, that Hank Pym has to continue, the timeline has to continue as if everything had simply just functioned the way it always did. And Hank Pym asks how. He says, how is he supposed to do this? How is this supposed to achieve? And at this point, Susan Storm chimes in, and Susan Storm says he's going to have to make himself forget. Now, this will be something that will actually happen outside of Hank Pym. It'll happen because of something he doesn't control. But for the most part, Hank Pym is again surprised to see Susan Storm, because in his time, in the 1960s, Susan Storm is much younger. But again, Susan Storm says that for the most part, they should bring Reed Richards in on this. They should could get a hold of Reed Richards in their time, because what they can do is explain to that version of Reed Richards what it is that's taken place, and Reed Richards can help them come to terms with what's going on, help them figure out a way to solve things. But Classic Wolverine says no. Classic Wolverine says that nobody else can know about this, because if anybody else is aware of this, then they'll in turn be affected by the actions here, and this has to be a self-contained situation in order to keep the timeline functioning the way that it always has. And so what Hank Pym does is he asks the question, how is this supposed to happen? He asks, how is it that he is supposed to create Ultron, knowing that Ultron is going to challenge and attempt to defeat the Avengers on multiple occasions, possibly leading to a situation whereby Ultron is going to take over the world? How can he do this without somehow doing anything to try to stop Ultron along the way, aside from creating a time-related virus, a time-release virus? But for the most part, we don't see any kind of answer that's given to him, because what we do is we transition back to Antarctica, back to the Savage Land, whereby we have the classic Wolverine, the one who initially traveled in time in the first place, the normal Wolverine, who was the version that classic Wolverine had encountered as he traveled back to try to stop himself from killing Hank Pym, and of course Susan Storm. And what Susan Storm asks is, are they both really going to come back here? Are they both really going to go back to the future? And what classic Wolverine says is no. He simply tells her to give them a minute. And so as the two of them enter the cave, Classic Wolverine tells normal Wolverine that he's seen too many things, that he's seen what happens when Hank Pym dies, that he's seen all these future outcomes, he's seen what happens when Morgana Le Fay takes over the world, and that these are memories that he just can't live with, that he doesn't want to continue with. And so what he does is he tells normal Wolverine to kill him. And so from here, we transition back to Susan Storm, and as a normal Wolverine, or I guess the only Wolverine now, is walking out, we get this kind of transition, we get this kind of situation where we see that, of course, Susan Storm is surprised to see that he killed the other version of himself, but we also see that Hank Pym is continuing to work on Ultron. And for the most part, Hank Pym is haunted by this. Hank Pym is really affected by the idea that he is consciously creating a robot that could potentially take over the world. And the question that Susan Storm asks is, what happens? What happens if Hank Pym creating a time-release virus is beyond his abilities? What happens if he creates a time-release virus in Ultron, but somewhere along the way Ultron becomes conscious of it and decides to correct it? No one really knows what would go on here. A lot of things are being left up to chance. But as the story begins to come to an end, as this comic begins to come to an end, we're left with Ultron as he's activating itself for the first time and calling Hank Pym his daddy. At this point, we're going to go ahead and bring this story to an end. I hope it wasn't too confusing for you guys. If it was, let me know and I'll try to explain a little bit better. But with that being said, I will catch you guys later. Peace.